Hello and welcome to the special July monthly Facebook Live here on Will's Fifth Quarter Special. I'm the host and creator of Will's Fifth Quarter Special, Will Farrell, here with you on a specifically special afternoon on July 31st as the MLB trade deadline is winding down once again. It is just 1 hour away, 59 minutes until that 3 p.m. deadline hits as teams around Major League Baseball, whether they're starting a rebuild or trying to contend for a title this year, they are making the moves necessary for their organization in the closing weeks of the MLB season. Just to outline some of the deals that have been made so far for the listeners at home, the biggest deal thus far to this point has been the one on July 18th between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Baltimore Orioles, as the Orioles, with two trades that those few days, started their rebuild. As the Dodgers acquired Manny Machado and sent over to Baltimore outfielder Yosniel Diaz and four other prospects. The Twins have acquired to this point Jeremy Hazelbaker for cash considerations from the Tampa Bay Rays. Francisco Mejia is sent to the San Diego Padres back on July 19th for reliever Brad Hand and Adam Simber. Jesse Chavez was sent in a two-player deal to the Chicago Cubs for left-hander Tyler Thomas. Jeurys Familia was sent to the Oakland Athletics from the New York Mets. Zach Britton was acquired by the New York Yankees just last week for right-handed pitcher Dylan Tate, Cody Carroll, and left-hander Josh Rogers. Nathan Eovaldi was also acquired by the Boston Red Sox for left-handed pitcher Jalen Beeks. Si Wong-Oh, the reliever from Baltimore, was acquired by the Colorado Rockies for two players and cash considerations. Martin Maldonado sent to the defending champion Houston Astros for international bonus pool money and a left-handed pitcher from the LA Angels. The White Sox loan trade thus far is right-handed pitcher Joakim Soria was sent to the Milwaukee Brewers for left-handed pitcher Cody Medeiros, 15 in the top 15 of the Brewers' top 30 prospect list, and Dominican League pitcher right-hander Wilber Perez. J.A. Happ sent to the New York Yankees by the Toronto Blue Jays for third baseman Brandon Drury and outfielder Billy McKinney, who a lot of people don't know was part of that deal that sent Aroldis Chapman to the Chicago Cubs. Cole Hamels and cash considerations were acquired by the Chicago Cubs just 4 days ago for right-handed pitcher Eddie Butler, Raleigh Lacey, and a player to be named later. Thus far today, some big trades have been made as well. The Arizona Diamondbacks continuing to try and add to their organization. And the White Sox, just 2 days ago, they acquired left-handed pitcher Caleb Frare for international bonus pool money. Brad Brace, another reliever from Baltimore, sent over to the Atlanta Braves for pool money. Zach Duke was just acquired yesterday by the Seattle Mariners for right-handed pitcher Chase DeYoung and infielder Ryan Costello. Robert Osuna is the big story thus far for the Houston Astros and one of the biggest stories that's being talked about around Major League Baseball. A player that's been suspended for most of the season for some PED issues and behavioral issues gets traded from the Toronto Blue Jays to the defending champion Houston Astros for Ken Giles, Hector Perez, and David Paulino. Adam Warren was sent to the Seattle Mariners for pool money from the Yankees. Lance Lynn was also acquired in a trade by the New York Yankees along with cash considerations for their first baseman and outfielder Tyler Austin and a right-handed pitcher. Adam Duvall was just acquired yesterday evening by the Atlanta Braves for Lucas Sims, Matt Whistler, and Preston Tucker. Ian Kinsler was also acquired by the Boston Red Sox along with cash considerations for two pitchers. And the big deal so far today, Leonis Martin and Kyle Dowdy being sent to the Cleveland Indians for Willie Castro, the shortstop, being sent over to the division rival Detroit Tigers. Tommy Pham and international pool bonus money just a few hours ago were sent to the Tampa Bay from the St. Louis Cardinals for left-handed pitcher Genesis Cabrera, outfielder Justin Williams, and right-hander Roel Ramirez. So we're going to talk about all Major League Baseball signings, maybe that are made after the trade deadline, after this Facebook Live. So we're keeping you posted throughout, as well as the waiver trades that'll be happening after today's deadline hits at 3 o'clock. That'll be taking place the next week or so. But the Cubs and White Sox are really in the thick of this right now. A lot of teams making moves. The Cubs' division rivals, especially the Milwaukee Brewers, the St. Louis Cardinals, they're making the moves necessary for their organization. And just looking at some of this stuff, the Chicago Cubs were in the rumors to get a Zach Britton or another frontline starter. Yu Darvish hasn't played up to snuff for them thus far, and they need that to improve. They need that to kind of stand out a little more for them, and they need some better signs. I mean, they have some infield injury issues as well, with Chris Bryant being out for hopefully not too an extended period of time, as the Cubs are looking to try and get good playoff position in the postseason. They have a good spot in their division they're holding right now in first place, closely followed behind by the Brewers and the St. Louis Cardinals. So a lot of interesting things to talk about here this afternoon, as Major League Baseball fans and GMs are right to work for their organizations, getting multiple phone calls, text messages, tweets, analysts. This is their big day. This is one of the biggest days aside from the MLB offseason. So I'm going to keep you guys posted till 3 o'clock. We're going to keep going till 3 o'clock, and we're going to see what we can find out. I'm going to keep you guys as up to date as possible. Please leave your comments on what trade maybe you'd like to see, what you're hoping will happen. And I see we have a few faces that have already tuned in. Molly and Brittany, thank you for joining. My old sports director and close friend, Steve Rosala of Redbird Athletics, a grad student now on the campus of Illinois State. Thanks for tuning in down back in Blono, Steve. Leave us some Cubs questions you have about your Cubbies up to this point before the deadline hits. And Andrew Weglars and some of my friends over at Lansing Public Works are tuning in just now. Good to have you guys on with me. And William Hatzel of 12:30 a.m. in Hammond, Indiana has just joined me. William, if you have any thoughts on the trade deadline, what you want some of these teams to maybe do that you haven't seen yet, maybe a Bryce Harper trade that some fans are curious to see possibly happen after it was released 2 days ago and just yesterday that they might trade him. And Mike O.D. is on another band, so we just talked about it here, Mike. Since you're just tuning in, the Cubs are in a lot of interesting spots right now at this deadline. They made the necessary moves they needed to for their organization last year, bringing in Jose Quintana from the Southside Chicago White Sox, trading Eloy Jimenez and Dylan Cease to the White Sox. And we just got a report courtesy of MLB Network. The Chicago Cubs have made a trade with the Washington Nationals to acquire an all-star reliever, Brandon Kinsler. So Kinsler will be joining Cole Hamels and the Chicago Cubs pitching staff. And this is a pitching staff that, they gave that money to Brandon Morrow. They gave money to pitchers like Tyler Chatwood, Yu Darvish. Now, Yu Darvish has had a pretty decent career so far, but injuries have really hindered him to a certain extent. They gave him a 5-year deal. They didn't bring back Jake Arrieta, and look what's happening, guys. Jake Arrieta is doing pretty good over in a Philadelphia Phillies team that's right not too far from where the Cubs are right now. They might be facing the Cubs, too, in the playoffs, and it's just exciting to see what happens. And the Phillies, just to speak of the Phillies there, they acquired just a few minutes ago all-star catcher Wilson Ramos from the Tampa Bay Rays. So the Tampa Bay Rays, the last 2 years, they've been making moves that look like they're buyers and they look like they're sellers. So they're almost kind of in the middle there. And I'm excited to see, as a baseball fan, what the Cubs do, what the Sox do, as I'm a diehard White Sox fan. Got the Moncada jersey on there. And Michael Dowell giving us some love right there on the show. Thank you very much. Please leave your comments, thoughts about any trades you'd like to see, Mike, what you might want to see the Cubs do in the last 50 minutes here. And a message from Ken Cott saying, hello, Mr. Cott. Thanks for joining. And we're going to talk about the White Sox, too, here in this segment. So if you have some thoughts, Mr. Cott, on what the Sox could do, what you want to see them do, get rid of James Shields maybe, an Avi Garcia trade would probably be nice. A Xavier Cedeno and Luis Avilan trade. A lot of teams looking for bullpen arms, so we could probably see Rick Hahn make moves such as those. So please give me your thoughts, leave your comments, suggestions. There's a lot going on with these teams. To me, so far, and we're going to talk about it towards the end as the minutes are closing. We'll probably talk about it a lot here in the middle of the 2 o'clock hour. Winners and losers. I enjoy reading just as much as any baseball fan the winners and losers that people will pick for a free agency period or the trade deadline in past histories. It's just so exciting to see what they'll talk about, what people will say, oh, I want to see, maybe this team should have done more or this team shouldn't have done more. It's just really exciting. When you're a baseball fan, you want to see maybe different things happen for your team that GMs might not do, that you might not see, and that's the beauty of talking about sports like this. On this show especially. We do that a lot when we put together the show. Me and my guest co-hosts will talk about it just like you guys do, and I'm in the same spot just as any of you right now, the average sports fan, just waiting to see what these teams will do. And the most exciting, probably keeping you on the edge of your seats part, that's the best way to quote that reference there, is that sometimes you won't hear about this stuff until the final 30 minutes, the final 10 minutes, maybe something your team was working on the whole time that you didn't know about, that wasn't maybe talked about in social media a lot. And it's just interesting to see how that stuff unfolds. And I know, just to talk about what the Nationals released, their GM, Mike Rizzo, just released earlier today that Bryce Harper will not be traded. I personally, now, of course, I'm not a Nationals fan, so if I was a Nationals fan, I'd probably have a more different opinion on this. But the Washington Nationals, they have a young hitter that is in the outfield, plays corner outfield quite well so far from what I've seen. Juan Soto, a 19-year-old, and they have Adam Eaton in the outfield, who's healthy at this point, a really good outfielder, former White Sox center fielder in Washington there. And Michael A. Taylor's another name, one they have in that outfield. They have good pieces in their outfield. Victor Robles not too far away. So if you're the Washington Nationals, and this is just my opinion as a White Sox fan, that it wasn't easy to see a guy like Chris Sale or a Jose Quintana go in the last few years here. But the Sox are in a different spot than the Nationals. They're farther in a rebuild. The Nats are trying to compete, but Bryce Harper has an expiring contract, and there's not a short chance that Bryce Harper is gonna go that he's gonna stay in Washington. So if I were the Nationals, I would trade Bryce Harper right now at the deadline. Now, this is going to probably be opposed by a lot of people and skeptics, but that's the beauty of baseball. We have our own opinions, and we still respect that. Respect how people view things in the game. And we have a trade request for Bryce Harper, as a matter of fact. Michael O'Donnell has reached out. He says, Bryce to the Cubs regardless. That would be a very favorite trade, Mike, with a lot of Cubs fans, as Bryce Harper played in high school, I believe, grew up with Chris Bryant. So that's a really interesting story. Two stars in Major League Baseball on different teams in the National League grew up together. So that would be a trade that sends shockwaves through the north side of Chicago. That would be a really huge trade. But the question would be who the Cubs would have to give up. They'd have to probably give up a great deal even for an expiring contract like Bryce Harper, probably an Ian Happ or an Albert Almora would have to be one of the first names in that trade, probably a pitching prospect from the Cubs organization. So I'm curious to see what happens with that too. I mean, that could be a possibility. We've seen Theo Epstein not be opposed of making big moves that could help his team, help his organization currently and in the future. So I could see that happening as a possibility. I'm sure a lot of Cubs fans would like that as well. A team that won the World Series in 2016, facing some injury problems, but the thing is they're strong in the outfield. And what that would present if the Cubs did get that trade for Bryce Harper, and Mike, I'm calling you out here, man. You made a trade request to Bryce Harper to the Cubs here. Give me a trade package in the comment section there. Who you would like to see the Cubs give up to get a Bryce Harper and try and re-sign him. If they get him, they're going to try and re-sign him in Chicago long term. keeping him and Chris Bryant as two focal points there. So that's a really interesting trade there. I like that first trade request that we have in this episode, Facebook Live here. So thank you, Mike, for your insight there. Please follow suit as Mike O'Donnell did to everyone else I'm reaching out on here. Please give me some of your thoughts. I see Larry Stasson's tuning in, Jeremy, my old high school classmate, and my old classmate from some comm classes over in the school communication at Illinois State, Tyler McCormick, has just joined the episode here on Facebook Live. So, Tyler, thanks for joining us. Jeremy, Mr. Stasson as well. So, Michael O'Donnell, if you're just tuning in, has given a interesting trade prediction. We are just starting to talk about the Chicago Cubs here a little bit. They might make that fans would enjoy. We have seen Theo Epstein make the most shocking moves at the most shocking period of time, especially that trade just years ago that sent Jeff Samardzija over to the Oakland Athletics for Billy McKinney, the outfielder who we just saw get traded to another organization in Baltimore, and the trade that sent Addison Russell, the long-term current shortstop of the Cubs, to Chicago. So we're going to see a lot of things happen here. I'm going to keep you guys posted up to date here. I'm just checking my Bleacher Report team stream here just to make sure I can keep you guys up to date every second of the trade deadline. And we have some more updates coming in at this point. And Jason Stark's reporting, this is just after the Wilson Ramos trade. We've seen a lot of teams trying to go for Chris Archer, who in my opinion is one of my favorite right-handed veteran pitchers in Major League Baseball. He's not a pitcher that is up there with Clayton Kershaw statistically right now. He's right in the middle of all those great pitchers, veterans in baseball right now. And he's a really good arm. He's been consistent when he needs to, a good leader from what I've heard and could tell. So we're seeing a lot of reports right now about pitchers and teams trying to get starting pitchers. An interesting spot Chris Archer's been connected to is A.J. Preller and the San Diego Padres. I find that really interesting. You know, the Padres have a lot of young arms that are going to be coming up in the next few years. Anderson Espinosa, who came to their system at the age of 18 in a trade that sent Craig Kimbrell to the Boston Red Sox. Qual Cantrell's another arm they have in their organization right now. They have a lot of young pitchers, a lot of young players, and a name especially they just got in the draft I think is going to be a big piece for them moving forward at the shortstop position. Now, of course, they have Fernando Tatis Jr., Gabriel Arias, a lot of young shortstops that could probably play other positions like a second or third base as well. Owen Miller, fellow Redbird of myself, he left Illinois State's baseball team and got drafted in the third round. So congrats to Owen Miller. Shout out to Owen Miller on the show here. Congrats, Redbird faithful. Support you in your new career at the Padres moving forward. But he's going to be a player to watch on the Padres. Has a really good bat, good veteran leadership probably he brought from college. But just looking at some of these names, Archer can almost go anywhere right now. We're hearing 6 different teams are connected to him. The Phillies, the Pirates are a really interesting name, a team that looked like they were going to start rebuilding last year, but it looks like they're trying to compete still. They're kind of in limbo mode there at this point. Neil Huntington's a really interesting GM. And the Braves, the Atlanta Braves, the team that just got Adam Duvall last night, is trying to make a deal that will help the Baltimore Orioles farm system. As Ken Rosenthal has just reported a few minutes ago, sources say the Braves have been in talks with the Orioles on Kevin Gausman. The O's have a deal in place pending medicals. If it's Gausman and if the trade is completed, it would reinforce perception that Chris Archer won't be going to the Braves, might be going to the Phillies. He'll probably be ending up with the Pirates, as Buster Olney and Joel Sherman reported as well. So give credit to those great analysts doing their due diligence on this one of these busy days in Major League Baseball. It's the MLB trade deadline. If you're just tuning in, I see Hector Carrion and Monica Mendoza are tuned in. Hector Carrion, a fellow Z&D News and Sports coworker, along with me on the staff. A great sports caller we've heard thus far. Good sports opinion in my view. Another Cubs fan, and Hector, Michael O'Donnell just since you're just tuning in here, predicted a Bryce Harper trade to the Cubs. So, Hector, I charge you. I know you're a big Cubs fan. You probably have some stuff to say about that prediction. If Bryce Harper got traded to the Chicago Cubs, what would the Cubs give up, in your opinion? What players could you see sent to Mike Rizzo and the Washington Nationals? So leave a comment about that. Anything you want to hear about Cubs, Sox, any trades you're reading about right now that are interesting to you, please share your thoughts. And thanks for tuning in to this episode. We still have quite a bit of time to go here, as it's only 2:21 clock time. The trade deadline does not hit until 3 o'clock. So I will stay here with all of you. My love support of this show that you guys give. I'm going to stay till 3 o'clock and a little bit after if you guys would like to talk trade deadline, maybe some stuff that comes out at 3. I'm going to stay here every minute of this hour that Major League Baseball fans, players are sitting on their hands and knees, waiting on the edge of their seat as players are getting ready for games. But there might be that situation where a player tonight maybe gets called out in the middle of the game or this afternoon. We've seen that with a lot of players. I know Austin Jackson years back was one I saw. I remember watching the Detroit game a little bit that day, and all of a sudden he leaves the field. You know, he's playing in the outfield right now while Detroit's on defense, and he's called to go into the dugout. And, you know, the analysts the broadcasters are wondering what the heck's going on here. And he's being called in because he just got traded. So that's a really interesting position we've seen players in, you know, with Justin Verlander getting traded last year as a waiver trade. People thought he was going to go at the deadline. You know, a lot of teams had him going to the Chicago Cubs, but then he ended up going to Houston, and he was part of that championship team, part of that piece that got them to be World Series champions. And that's a really interesting thing I enjoy as a baseball fan, seeing the unexpected. You know, one player might be predicted to go one way, but then all of a sudden he goes to another team. So just some new reports that are coming in courtesy of MLB Trade Rumors. And if you don't follow it, Cubs and Sox fans, followers of Chicago sports, Sports Mockery is a really great site. You know, it's a really good place to follow some really good written articles, some unexpected things you might not find out on a Bleacher Report or a rumors site that fans follow. So I recommend checking out that as well. So another trade has just taken place for the Philadelphia Phillies, who are trying to contend into the postseason here. They have a good standing record in the National League. The Phillies have acquired Aaron Lope, the left-handed reliever from the Toronto Blue Jays, for a prospect that has not been named at this point. That was Jerry Krasnick reporting that source. And the Pirates are moving closer to a deal for starting pitcher Chris Archer. Mike Fiers is being neared in a deal that will send him to the Oakland Athletics. We've known Billy Beane to make moves like we saw years ago when they made it to the playoffs in the West there, but they didn't get past that wild card game. The trades that got them John Lester from Boston and some other players as well. That trade that also sent Aston Russell to the Cubs, as I mentioned earlier. So it's been reported here as well that, you know, just some pitchers are going around, but the Braves are in it for Kevin Gausman along with the Orioles. It's just really interesting to see where some of these players are going to fall. And a really big report has just come out. The Los Angeles Dodgers, after acquiring Manny Machado, who's on an expiring contract, after losing Corey Seager to an injury, the Los Angeles Dodgers, who last year tried to get a trade for this infielder from the Minnesota Twins, are close to acquiring Minnesota Twins star second baseman Brian Dozier. This being reported by Dan Hayes and just reported out by Ken Rosenthal over at the Athletics. So the Brian Dozier trade is really interesting, guys. Brian Dozier's in a contract year. He's done so many great things over in Minnesota. He's so fun to watch. Knowing as a Sox fan, we play the Minnesota Twins a lot, you know, in division play. So just getting to see a player of his caliber, leadership, his presence on the field, whether it's at bat or in the field, he's a difference maker. And the Dodgers were in the World Series last year. They had a chance to win it. They had Logan Forsythe holding second base, who I thought did pretty well, playing in Tampa Bay a little bit and then coming over to LA and playing pretty well. But I think this deal is huge. Now the question will be what prospects the Minnesota Twins are going to be asking for, what they're looking for. I can maybe see a pitcher or one of the outfielders go. I don't think a Alex Verdugo is going to go in this trade. A Walker Buehler probably will not go either because Brian Dozier he's going to be a rental for the Dodgers, just like Manny Machado is right now. Of course, we don't know for sure if Manny Machado is going to get re-signed in L.A., moving Corey Seager to third base there. Could be a question of what happens with Justin Turner, of course, but it's going to be interesting to see if they do get Brian Dozier in L.A. after getting Manny Machado. That's going to send a big message to teams in Major League Baseball that the Dodgers, they've always been for real, the Dodgers, from what we've seen this year. But that's going to make them even closer to being a huge contender in the postseason and maybe another World Series run, maybe a championship for the Dodgers. We don't know what's going to happen, but that's a big rumor right now. It's the biggest one we've had in the last hour here. So I will keep you up to date on anything that comes out on that. John Heyman reporting as well, according to a source, that the Giants are entering the sweepstakes for a pitcher in Matt Harvey that wasn't doing well in New York this year with the Mets, got traded to Cincinnati early in the year, and just had a bounce-back part of the season with the Cincinnati Reds. And the Reds are rebuilding, so we'll see what happens with them. Dodgers and Twins nearing a trade, as I mentioned, MLB trade rumors, Ken Rosenthal reporting that. And Chris Cotillo is calling that right now. A big name could be moved just now. It's Brian Dozier. He might be becoming a Los Angeles Dodger, joining an infield that has Max Muncy, Cody Bellinger, Manny Machado, Justin Turner. That'd be the best outfield in Major League Baseball, in my point, especially in the National League. And the Braves, according to John Heyman, have a deal with the Baltimore Orioles for starting pitcher Kevin Gausman. That's a really big report there, courtesy of John Heyman. Now, we haven't talked about it yet, but my Chicago White Sox, they made some really interesting trades so far. Now, a move that a lot of people, won't say is a big move, but it's a big move for a rebuilding team like the White Sox. They have really good pitching in their system, with the Major League team. But Caleb Frare, I think, was a really good acquisition for pool money with the Yankees there. That trade, I think that was a pretty big deal for the Sox because I did a little bit of reading, and Caleb Frare has very good numbers up to this point. He has a .81 ERA in the minor leagues, combined with his time in Double-A and Triple-A in the New York Yankees farm system. And he's coming to a Chicago White Sox team that, after trading Joaquin Soria, Thiago Rivera right now is taking over those setup and closer reps that Soria got with the White Sox, the 24-year-old reliever that was claimed on waivers by the Sox this past offseason. Thiago Vieira, really good speed, but I think this Caleb Frare guy is going to be another piece. When Rick Hahn gets this team where he wants it in a year or two, the players start coming up, the Eloys, the Dylan Ceases, Michael Kopech, Alex Hansen. These players start coming up. It's going to make it really exciting to see what pitchers will kind of fit into those positions. And it was just reported on Bleacher Report, according to ESPN, the Minnesota Twins have made a trade with, and I'm going to put my phone up to the camera here so you guys can see. You guys can't see it there, so I'll read it. The Los Angeles Dodgers have just acquired former All-Star second baseman Brian Dozier from the Minnesota Twins. It has not been released at this point yet what players the Minnesota Twins will be acquiring from the Los Angeles Dodgers. And the Orioles have also just made another trade, their third biggest trade of the MLB trade deadline period. Kevin Gausman has just been traded to the Atlanta Braves. So he joins the staff in Sean Newcomb, Luis Gajora, Julio Teheran. Gausman becomes one of the big pitchers in that rotation. A Baltimore Orioles team that's rebuilding, and he goes to an Atlanta Braves team that has a lot of young players and, Dansby Swanson, second baseman that's a pretty impressive hitter and defender in my opinion. Ozzie Albies, Freddie Freeman, who's a great veteran on and off the field for this team, and Kurt Suzuki, another great veteran catcher for them. And Sean Newcomb just had a really big game the other day. He almost had a no-hitter, but he couldn't get the last out that he was looking for. And they make the trade that puts them even closer. The Phillies and Braves, as I mentioned. You talk about the Cubs, the Nationals, the Dodgers in the National League. Dark horse teams to make it far in the postseason right now, in my opinion, are the Atlanta Braves and the Philadelphia Phillies. Some really interesting teams there. A lot of young players in those organizations with the Major League Club that they're hungry to win. They're winning right now. They have pretty solid records there in the National League in their respective divisions, and they're trying to make moves. But Brian Dozier, if anybody tries to pick two deals right now, of course, in the last 29 minutes here, there's going to be some deals that might be bigger than this. Maybe a Bryce Harper does get traded in the closing minutes. We don't know that for sure. But the Kevin Gausman trade to Atlanta and the LA Dodgers, not just getting Manny Machado in the last few weeks here, but just getting Brian Dozier from the Minnesota Twins. I don't care if those two players aren't expiring deals right now. The Los Angeles Dodgers get these players for the next few months. Their talent, their hitting, their leadership, their poise. And they're going to mesh well with this team, I think, in LA. And a manager in Dave Roberts, who's a baseball guy that I think is going to – this team's going to – they just put themselves in a position now of just getting Brian Dozier where they could be quoted as World Series contenders at this point to get to another World Series like last year, winning the National League. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what the Cubs do right now. Theo Epstein doing his due diligence. And Rick Hahn has not been reported to make any deals right now. We have not heard anything yet in the closing minutes. But, of course – we don't hear about Rick Hahn's trades until like after 3 o'clock or just in the closing minutes. He keeps his stuff hush hush, and it'll be really interesting to see what Rick Hahn and the Chicago White Sox do. And my good friend over at Lansing Public Works in Lansing, Illinois, just got on his 2:30 break period there with the guys at work. Rick McFarland has joined the Facebook Live MLB trade deadline special here on the show that is your fifth quarter sports talk, Will's fifth quarter special. So Rick McFarland, a friend of the show, and to myself, the host of the show, thanks for joining us on this special episode. You're a diehard White Sox fan along with myself, Rick. So please leave your thoughts on why we haven't seen a Rick Hahn trade yet. Would you like to see a James Shields, an Avi Garcia, a Xavier Cedeno go and get traded from the Chicago White Sox during this period of the deadline in the closing minutes? And I see Mr. Cott's here. I know you're here, Mr. Cott. I haven't forgotten you, a very good friend of the show and a very well-respected White Sox fan, in my opinion. Mr. Cott, I see you're here, so you obviously want something more Sox stuff to talk about. So with Rick and Ken Cott coming on, we're going to talk a little more White Sox. So right now the White Sox organization's in a really good spot. They have outfielders galore right now that can play any outfield position. And a player a lot of people might be looking to get in a trade, teams that have outfield injuries, infield injuries right now, like we mentioned, the Chicago Cubs. If I'm the Cubs right now, I'd be calling Rick Hahn right now. There's two players they could get for the short term to hold the positions of where Chris Bryant is, keeping Javi Baez at second and Russell at short. It'd be really good moves for Theo Epstein, in my opinion. Like lower key moves, we don't have to give up a lot of their farm system, a farm they're trying to improve after bumping up some of their former farm system players the last few years, the Cubs. I'd go and get a Lurie Garcia and a James Shields. Now, the White Sox, of course, probably won't get much for James Shields, but their goal in getting rid of James Shields would be to get rid of that salary, and James Shields probably wants to play for a contender this year. He's at that point in his career where he wants to play for a contending team, and he wouldn't have to move that far going to the north side. And I think he'd be a good fourth or fifth starter for the Chicago Cubs organization. Lurie Garcia would be – now he's a good piece, Lurie, for the White Sox. But, with Adam Engel, we don't know if Avi Garcia is going to get traded. He might. But if he doesn't, Avi still has his spot in the outfield there. Nicky Delmonico still has his spot as well. So the Sox can afford at this point, in my opinion, to trade a Lurie Garcia and a James Shields. Maybe a deal that, we saw 3 players combined in a deal in 7-player trade to the New York Yankees. Maybe we can see that with the Cubs and Sox here. just a year after Jose Quintana went in a deal that sent 4 players from the Cubs farm to the White Sox. I could predict a trade right now, in my opinion, of Luis Garcia, a James Shields, and either Luis Avilan or Xavier Cedeno, whichever one the Cubs have more interest in, from the White Sox to the Cubs for some good minor league pieces from the Cubs organization. And I think that'd be a really good move for the Chicago White Sox. The Cubs still have some pretty good hitting minor league players right now, some good major league talent they're not going to want to let go of. Now, a really interesting player that's been talked about maybe in a possible trade to return to the New York Yankees is Curtis Granderson, a hometown player from my old high school over at Thornton Fractional South. Might get traded to the Yankees, might go to the Phillies. I know the Phillies have been rumored to want him as well. That's going to be an interesting name too. But just talking about the White Sox here, those are the moves we're going to see them make at this point. There's not too many players that Rick Hahn's is going to want to give away. You know, Jose Abreu has been so widely talked about. You know, there's some needs at first base, but not as much in the league to where the White Sox would gamble trading a player in Jose Abreu that they want to be the team leader moving through this rebuild. When these players come up, the Luis Roberts, the Eloy Jimenez, all these young players the Sox have coming up through their system to the Major League Ball Club. And that's going to be a big importance. Jose Abreu is a very big piece you do not want to move on the chessboard that is the White Sox organization. And it is just being reported as well, courtesy of Jeff Passan, and it's being reported by John Heyman as well after Passan just reported it here on Twitter. Chris Archer has been traded from the Tampa Bay Rays to the Pittsburgh Pirates. And Jared Krasnick has just also reported the Arizona Diamondbacks, after acquiring Brad Ziegler, a return of Brad Ziegler to Arizona from Miami. They have acquired a reliever from the Texas Rangers, Jake Diekman. Diekman to the D-backs is close, according to Jared Krasnick just 2 minutes ago on Twitter. If so, he would join Ziegler as a second big bullpen addition by Arizona today. And the Braves have just, it was just reported a minute ago, but John Heyman has just reported that the Orioles have agreed to trade righty Kevin Gausman to the Atlanta Braves. Gausman currently has a 5-8 record on the year and a 4.43 ERA. The Dodgers have agreed officially to acquire former All-Star second baseman star Brian Dozier of the Minnesota Twins, who will now be wearing Dodger blue in an infield that now features an impressive set of Cody Bellinger, Max Muncy, platoon we've seen this year. Muncy's had a pretty good year for the Dodgers. He was in the home run derby as well. And then infield now has Manny Machado playing short, while Corey Seager's on the injured reserve. And it'll be interesting if they keep a Justin Turner, if they keep a Manny Machado. If they don't keep, they might keep Dozier. The Dodgers might bring back both Dozier and Machado to build that infield of the future they could be looking for. We're not going to know what's going to happen. Like some of these teams will get players that won't stay with the team, when they go into free agency. Manny Machado is going to probably want to look at other teams, so he might not stay with the Dodgers. But it's going to be interesting to see. And just looking at the White Sox here, some interesting reports on the social media connections here. Shy Sox fan Mike saying, I'd love to know what Rick Hahn's doing right about now. Well, he's probably, just to answer that guy's question, he's probably, looking at, what is best for the team. And it's just really interesting to see, what the White Sox are going to do. Because now there's 21 minutes left before the 3 o'clock trade deadline hits. Now the Sox could probably trade a Xavier Cedeno, an Avi Garcia, and a Luis Avilan, through waiver trades. We've seen that done before. The White Sox actually got one of their current players, Luis Garcia, a good 5 years ago, if fans aren't remembering this. They traded an Alex Rios for Luis Garcia, the speedster, who now is wearing Chicago White Sox black and white the last few years here. But the White Sox acquired the player they traded for Luis Garcia on the waivers from the Toronto Blue Jays, Alex Rios, years back. So, just seeing a player like Justin Verlander go from a Detroit Tigers team last year that wasn't contending. And the Houston Astros wanted that pitcher. Now they had Garrett Cole, Lance McCullers, Dallas Keuchel. They had some really interesting pitchers over there. But when you want to win a championship like the Astros did, you need that another pitcher, that has experience. They had younger pitchers on that team. They didn't have like a middle-aged, mid-30s veteran like Verlander that was, as accomplished, still as talented and respected in Major League Baseball. They went and got Justin Verlander, and he's paid off for them so far. And it's just eye-opening to see that Jacob deGrom and Noah Syndergaard, who have been so widely talked about in the last few weeks and last month even, to get traded, they have not been traded yet. They are still a part of their respective organizations. And it is being reported that outfield prospect and pitching prospect Tyler Glasnow and outfield prospect Austin Meadows, two high pieces there in the Pirates minor league system, are being sent in the Chris Archer trade. They'll be going to Tampa Bay, and Chris Archer will now be in the NL Central against his former team that he started with in the beginning of his career, the Chicago Cubs in the minors. He is going to the Pittsburgh Pirates. And it's just been reported by Ken Rosenthal at The Athletic that the Orioles are not done dealing. As we mentioned, they are making trades, a quick rebuild here like we saw maybe with the Yankees. But the Orioles are going to have a lot more trades to make if they're trying to rebuild. Their rebuild's just beginning at this point, and they're unloading players that maybe are, expiring contracts or players they don't believe are in their long-term plans. They are working on a trade with the Milwaukee Brewers, who just got the Brewers just got, as we mentioned a week or so ago, a Mike Moustakas from the Kansas City Royals. The Royals are another team that's rebuilding. We've seen rebuilding teams start and end. It's been a trend in the last decade in baseball right now. I think it's a really great trend, bringing in a lot of young players, giving veteran players that maybe haven't found more playing time with the team a chance to have that. So I think this trend we're seeing in Major League Baseball the last 5, 6, 10 years is a really good trend for the future of the league and the sport. I'm enjoying this. I think it's really great for baseball and the fans. It just gives them, the younger generation, the excitement maybe some teams didn't see with their fan base. And it's just really exciting. And a third player is also going to be included in that Pirates trade, according to Joel Sherman. And it's just being reported by Joel Sherman as well, just 45 seconds ago, that Jake Diekman, the reliever, as we mentioned, going to the Diamondbacks, it's giving the Diamondbacks a deep, versatile pen, in his opinion. And Jared Krasnick was the first to report on that deal, as Ken Rosenthal mentions here in his latest tweet. And the Orioles might be sending a Jonathan Schoop to the Milwaukee Brewers. Chris Archer has 2 team options at 2020 and 2021. So that's why we saw the players of that value of Glasnow, Meadows, and a still being decided third piece going to Tampa Bay from Pittsburgh. And Archer's going to fill that role Pittsburgh had when they had a Garrett Cole, who's now – we haven't even talked about Garrett Cole a lot lately. Now, he's had an incredible season for the Houston Astros, but a lot of people don't see him, in that rotation as consideration. That rotation over in Houston, they have Justin Verlander, a great young pitcher, right-hander in my view, in Lance McCullers Jr., a Dallas Keuchel, and a Garrett Cole. So they have really good pitching, and Chris Archer is going to fill that, frontline leadership role that the Pirates need after the Pirates traded a Garrett Cole. So this is a really good move, in my opinion, for Neil Huntington, who we haven't seen do a lot. He's doing more now that this team's in contention, close to contention. We haven't seen him make a lot of moves. He's very conservative, a lot of baseball fans will say. So the reported player as well, earlier we heard that Marlins outfielder Cameron Maybin was traded to the Seattle Mariners. Jerry Dipoto is just making so many moves. I remember just watching an hour or two ago, the MLB network analysts were just giving praise and just excited to see a GM like Jerry Dipoto, who made a lot of moves over in LA. He brought LA Albert Pujols when he was their GM over there. And a CJ Wilson, who's, I don't know, off the radar at this point in baseball. the Mariners are making trades. They have Alex Colomé, who they got from Tampa Bay, in their bullpen. They're making other moves as well. And it looks like Bryson Brigman, the infield prospect in the Mariners organization, is the player heading to the Miami Marlins in the Cameron Maybin deal, which I think is a great move because that's one of the holes that the Marlins have right now after D. Gordon was sent to where he is now in Seattle. I think for Derek Jeter's team, a lot of respect for Derek Jeter there. He's making a lot of good moves right now and just doing his diligence. He's putting his team in a really good spot. And Raphael, another one of my old coworkers at Lansing Public Works, is on the show here, a new fan of the show here. So, Raph, good to see you on here, man. And my good pothole buddy, teammate, and partner back in my days at Public Works, my buddy Kevin Shriver is joining this Facebook Live. So, Shribes, welcome to the show. Raphael as well. Trevor Mesco, who I forgot to mention, is on as well. And Fritzy Flores, a old St. Anne classmate and over at TF South as well. So it's a pleasure to have you all on here with me right now. A shout out to my old coworkers, Captain, Kenny Soderstrom, Schreiber, Tommy Botkin, Rick McFarland, and all my old coworkers at Lansing Public Works. Keep doing what you're doing over there. Stay out of trouble, Planner. And just shout out to those guys. I remember just a year ago when I was one of the part-time workers there at Lansing Public Works, sitting in the position all you fans are at right now, before this show was even in existence, following the trade deadline minute by minute, refreshing, and refreshing minute after minute to see what new moves come. And that's what all fans for every team in Major League Baseball are doing right now. And the White Sox, we mentioned we were hoping they would make some more moves. They just made a move with the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays are very active today on this trade deadline, sending players from one end to the other, whether it be buying and selling. The White Sox have acquired Class A lefty Hunter Shriver. That's a really interesting last name spelling there, Shryver, from Tampa Bay for international signing bonus pool money. So the Sox have sent bonus pool money to the Yankees and the Rays, two teams there in the AL East. A really interesting move there for the White Sox. They have a really strong young core in pitching, and I think once they have some of these pitchers in AAA come up and in AA, like the Dylan Cease, the Kopech, the Hanson, the Zach Birdie, a lot of these pitchers that are going to be coming up in the next year or so, that's a really good move for the White Sox. A good low-key move by Rick Hahn. They might not be making the big blockbuster moves, selling some of the players Sox fans would hope for in Avilan, Cedeno, Wamanaya, maybe a low-key move in the waiver trades. We don't know. There's no Avi Garcia trade at this point. No Yolmer Sanchez, no Abreu. Now, of course, we don't want to see Abreu go, so he probably won't get traded at all. But it's eye-opening. The lower moves might pay off even more than the big possible moves. So Darren Van Schoen is reporting that the White Sox made their third move. And, Rick, I have to disagree with you there. I do not see Abreu going anywhere. Jose Abreu will be staying in the White Sox organization, current and future. I believe he is a piece they need moving forward in this rebuild to stay with the Major League club, being a leader. And a lot of analysts have reported that as well in NBC Sports Chicago there. And I don't see Rick Hahn trading Jose Abreu. That would probably be, in my opinion, the biggest mistake he could make at this year's trade deadline. And we've seen Rick Hahn made a mistake in the last few years, actually. Now, that was when the White Sox were in a different spot a few years ago. They were still trying to contend. This is before Rick Hahn released the classic mired in mediocrity speech in Chicago. We saw Fernando Tatis Jr. go to the Padres, and they got James Shields in that trade. They had to give up Fernando Tatis. And, excuse me, I'm going to take a drink here. I don't see Rick Hahn making that type of mistake. So, Rick, I respect your opinion, but I do not see any Jose Abreu trade happening at all. And somebody named Patrick Saunders also just confirmed that the White Sox will not be trading Jose Abreu. Now, that could always change. I'm not saying that stuff can't change, but sometimes, a team just has to put their foot down and say, no matter what the offer, we're not going to make that deal. And I think Rick Hahn is doing that right now with Jose Abreu. And Adam Jamka, Loyola graduate there, is joining the show as well. So good to have you on there, Mr. Jamka. So we've been on 50 minutes now, probably the longest running Facebook Live this show podcast will ever have. But it's a very exciting time, a very big moment in Major League Baseball. So I'm going to stay with you the final 10 minutes here as we have a 10-minute warning on the 3 p.m. trade deadline hitting. I'll stay on for another 5 more minutes as well, as some deals will be reported after the 3 o'clock deadline. So thank you as well for staying on part of this show. I'm going to pull up now. Now, we released a Twitter poll. Excuse my dog in the background there. I'm in my bedroom, so my dog Luke's barking a little bit. He's probably excited to hear the show. The Chicago Cubs Twitter poll that I released on the show, I'm going to pull that up and read the results of the Twitter poll. And we had a whopping 56 total votes on this Twitter poll. I wrote, the MLB trade deadline is less than 48 hours away, and Cubs GM Theo Epstein has more moves to help the injury issues or needs. After getting Cole Hamels, what moves could the Cubs make to improve before Tuesday's 3 p.m. trade deadline? And people cast their vote and joined the conversation. So as the host and creator of Will's Fifth Quarter Special, I am forever grateful for the continued support of the show and the poll. And we have interesting numbers on this. The 4 choices I created were trade for Jacob deGrom, trade for an infielder, trade for a Brad Ziegler. Now, the Ziegler trade is obviously impossible to happen with the Cubs as he's now back with Arizona. At that point, we didn't know yesterday where Brad Ziegler was going to go. And 19% say stay in Pat, but 54% say trade for Jacob deGrom. And another Twitter poll that was created just about a week ago, and it was featured, it was mentioned on the White Sox podcast featured of the MLB trade deadline and Bears training camp. It was with Kevin and Alex Dillon, 2 of my closest friends in the world. Episode 15. So if you guys haven't heard that, episode 15 of Will's Fifth Quarter Special posted this past weekend. It's one you guys are really going to want to check out. So the 3 choices I created for maybe players that'll be the best trade by the Sox at the deadline, 79% out of the 34 votes, and this is a final poll result as well. 79% said Joakim Soria. They were right, as he could be the big trade the Sox have made. James Shields, 18% say, and Luis Avilan, 3%. I hope for that 3% that say that maybe Luis Avilan is a waiver trade. You know, we've seen Rick Hahn and the White Sox, when they had Kenny Williams, the GM, make moves at the waiver trade portion after the trade deadline. And Mr. Cobb makes a really interesting point, saying Abreu will be retired by the time the White Sox are ready to contend. That's a really interesting point, and as I mentioned, that could be a possibility. So I'm not going to deny what you're saying there, Mr. Cobb. I think that's a really good point. I have a lot. I have a lot of your opinion in baseball, sports, and the Sox, but I think Abreu's future with the Sox, he's going to either end his career in Chicago and not be part of the contention, or he's going to be part of the contention maybe in 2020 or 2021 with the Sox. It's going to be a really interesting thing to see as the team moves forward. He's a really big piece either way, I think. So I think that's a really interesting statement. And I'm going to pull up my Bleacher Report here again. Once again, I appreciate people following the show here. The people that are on right now, I know some of you are on Twitter. I mentioned this in the last episode. Go hit up our Twitter page after the deadline hits at 3 p.m. Keep me posted on some of your thoughts like you are here in the comment section during the waiver trade period or the aftermath of some of these trades that you're going to see hit at 3 o'clock or hit in the closing minutes here, as we are just 6 minutes away from the deadline hitting at 3 p.m. in Major League Baseball. So leave some of your remarks in the Twitter page. I'm going to probably make another Twitter poll or 2 with all Major League teams, Cubs and Sox as well. So please follow those. I would appreciate that. Continue to follow our Facebook, social media as well, and Instagram. Snapchat's going to still be growing, but I love seeing comments like this, and I'm hoping I get to see more in the future on the Twitter page as well, because Twitter's a great way to do that, I think, where you can leave comments, thoughts, link your thoughts. I know I'm going to try and do that a little more as well, but, you guys are showing me your support here today, and this is very enjoyable for me as the host to see this outweighing support, because you guys are giving me more to talk about. I know I have a ton I want to talk about that I have so far that I could even talk about more in depth about the trade deadline. But this show is not just for me. It's for you guys, the listeners, to enjoy, for the average sports fan as well. So thank you so much for showing that to me today, your comments. Just a shout out of thanks to the people that have commented so far. Mr. Cott, Rick McFarland, Ralph Alvarado over at Lansing Boat Works, Mr. Cott, as I mentioned, Michael Donnell, the interesting trade prediction of Bryce to the Cubs. And Mike, I'm going to give you a vote of confidence there. If he doesn't get traded there in the trade deadline here, maybe a waiver trade, maybe the Cubs go sign him. We'll have to see. So I'm not going to rule out anybody's predictions here. As a fan, I'm interested in them, the various perspectives people have, and just where things are going. So the final 4 minutes here, we're just seeing 6 minutes ago. It was confirmed at 6:70 the score. The White Sox have acquired Class A pitching prospect Hunter Shriver from the Rays in Tampa Bay in exchange for international signing bonus pool money. Going back to MLB rumors right now at this point, courtesy of Bleacher Report, the Dodgers have acquired another player. They have made a trade with the Toronto Blue Jays. They have acquired John Axford to improve their bullpen. So just after getting Brian Dozier a good 10 or 20 minutes ago, they have traded for John Axford. The biggest deal remaining going down to the wire, according to Buster Olney, reporting this just 2 minutes ago, it appears Shoop to the Brewers, which is a trade being discussed between the Baltimore Orioles and Milwaukee, is very serious. So that means we probably could see that as a waiver trade. We've seen a lot of trades that haven't happened at the deadline that are really close, could happen on the waiver trade period. We're hearing the Mets do not intend to make any more trades before the deadline, which is 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 o'clock Central Time. And the Mets are making a move, though, perhaps not sort of that fans were hoping for. Reported by MLB Trade Rumors, they have claimed infielder Jack Reinheimer off waivers from the Arizona Diamondbacks, and they optioned him to Las Vegas. And this is to make room on the 40-man. They made 40 room on the 40-man roster for him, as Yoenis Cespedes has been transferred to the 60-day DL for the New York Mets. The Rays are unlikely to trade Sergio Romo, but they will probably end up designating for assignment Heteravia. This is according to Joel Sherman on Twitter. Follow his Twitter page at Joel Sherman. They could not find a market for him, and they want to play Willie Adames, their young shortstop of the future, starting at the shortstop position. Joel Sherman also reports Archer is signed his contract 3 years at $27 million, counting the options at the years 2020 and 2021. So if the Pirates can't make up the gap for wild card or NL Central this year, they have a good starter under a team-friendly deal going forward. I couldn't agree more. And please also follow, I would recommend checking out Buster Olney on his Twitter page at Ken Rosenthal. That's Ken Rosenthal, who writes for The Athletic, over at The Athletic. Jerry Krasnick at J Krasnick. Jeff Passan at Jeff Passan. And Joel Sherman, as I mentioned, at Joel Sherman. So we are 1 minute away from the trade deadline hitting in Major League Baseball. So in the next few minutes here, we're going to hear some deals that haven't come through that are about to. And I'm going to update you guys on those. So I'm going to stay here with you guys on until just about 3:07 period. So please stick with me through the end of this video. I would greatly appreciate it. The Brewers are close on a deal for the Orioles second baseman Jonathan Scope, according to Ken Rosenthal. You can follow him at Ken Rosenthal on Twitter. So I will be posting, as I mentioned, a few more Twitter polls in the next few days. Winners and losers of the trade deadline, moves the Cubs and Sox have made that were maybe good or bad, and maybe they could make moving forward. There's a lot of polls I'm going to put out at this point in the season. It's really interesting, and just seeing what could happen in the waiver period is really interesting as well. Like I mentioned earlier in the segment here of this Facebook Live, what happened with a Justin Verlander. We could maybe see that happen again this year, a player be in that position. So the trade deadline has just hit at 3 p.m. exactly. So I'm interested to see what is going to happen that comes out that we haven't seen. I'm really interested to see that at this point, and we are going to see what teams are going to do. There's some stuff that hasn't happened that could happen, that should have happened, and the deadline has just hit, and I'm just, as a fan, really curious to see. We're wondering what the heck's going to come out of this. And just a minute here, I'm going to check. Hopefully I have that right. And yes, the non-waiver trade deadline has just ended. Just had to double check that. I already knew that, but just to make sure I was on track. 4 p.m. Eastern time, and I will be checking my Twitter page here as well. If you do not know where my Twitter is, you can find it at William D. Farlow, at William, capital W, capital D, and capital F as in Frank, ARLOW. So you can follow me at Twitter there, and I will post some more Twitter polls there for you guys to enjoy and leave more comments on. Please, just go on your Twitter one day, and if you have a thought you want to share that you find out, in the NBA, Major League Baseball, National Football League during the training camp period here, anything, any sports, I am ready to hear it. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say moving forward. You guys have shared your voice already so far. Impressive opinions in my view that I enjoy hearing so much as a fellow sports fan and the host of this show, Will's Fifth Quarter Special. So I encourage you to continue sharing that, sharing your thoughts like you do on these Facebook Lives, but don't let that, discourage you from doing it on Twitter on your own. When you have some downtime and you want to share something with me, share it with me. I'd love to hear it, and I'll share it with the fellow listeners at home as well. So just looking at some of the reports here, we're going to obviously have some more coming out here at the trade deadline. Matt Harvey was not traded. That's courtesy of John Heyman at John Heyman. And Bruce Levine says, remember, deadline deals sometimes are announced as later as long as paperwork medicals are done by 4 p.m. Eastern time. So that's a really good point as well. And my friend Cade Heather has commented on what Jeff Passan reported, the trade that the Rays made to send their starting pitcher Chris Archer to the Pittsburgh Pirates. I'm just gonna give a shout out here to my buddy Cade Heather, the writer for the Vedette, former coworker over at WZND News and Sports. He is their co-sports editor, so you can follow him at Cade _ space icon Heather on Twitter. Please check him out there. He writes some really good articles there for the Vedette, so shout out to Cade there. Keep up the good work, buddy. He reports that sure, the Pirates could maybe make the playoffs, but this wasn't worth it. And he comments on the Jeff Passan trade saying, regardless, this is an awesome baseball trade, and it's clearly going to be an exciting finish. Cade, I could not agree more. And as I'm scrolling through here, we are seeing the trades continue to unfold and be released as well. Just going back to Bleacher Report here in the few minutes just after the trade deadline, Matt Harvey wasn't traded. Word of trades could still trickle out as we're hearing a lot in the social media just a few minutes here. Last few minutes, people are saying that to the White Sox. This is at this point what we might see, at the waiver part of the trade post-trade deadline period, as now the non-waiver trade deadline has ended, but the waiver deadline has opened to Major League Baseball at this point. So the White Sox, just to finalize the moves they've made before the deadline, they traded Joakim Soria to the Milwaukee Brewers for left-handed pitcher Cody Medeiros out of Hawaii. He was the 13th overall pick in the 2014 MLB draft to the Milwaukee Brewers 4 years ago. And interestingly enough, and I mentioned this on the podcast episode 15 that's now up. It's been up since this past weekend for you guys to enjoy and check out as well. And I haven't decided yet what I'm doing for episode 16. I know I told you guys on the show the last few episodes that this is the way I'm going to announce over the summer. I'm going to announce my guest co-hosts, what I do for the next episode, but I don't know for sure yet. I know I'm going to try. I have my close friend who's like a brother to me, Kevin Dolinar, leaving for his new job in New York in engineering pretty soon when I'll be at school. So it'll be the last chance he could probably do it in person until this point moving forward. So I'm going to try and get him on, and I'm going to try and get my dad on again too. So it's planning in the works. You guys can expect an episode 16 either next week. I'm shooting for next week. That would be a great time to do it. And probably an episode 17 to open my first few weeks back on the Illinois State campus, as I'm heading back in just a few weeks for my final fall semester as I graduate in December of 2018. So nothing yet more has trickled out. So in the closing minutes here, I want to thank people that have tuned in to this Facebook Live special of the MLB trade deadline coverage on all MLB teams as well. I don't like to discourage any team in this special episode, and I haven't. So I want to thank people that have joined: Adam Jamka, Kevin Schreiber, Fritzy, Trevor Mesco, Hannah, Jordan, Monica, Rick McFarland, Hector, Tyler McCormick, Mr. Larry Stassen, Mike O'Donnell, Mr. Cott, Mr. Hatzel, my close friend Steve Rizal, my former sports director, Molly, Brittany, Andrew, and William Hatzel. I thank you all for tuning in, and people that will check out this episode in the future, thank you for the time you're taking to do so. Please follow my Twitter page at William D. Farlow to find and cast your vote and join the conversation on our more Twitter polls that are going to be coming out throughout the summer, and conversation questions I'm going to pose to you, all of you. And thank you for the support you give this show day in and day out. Please continue to do that, as it is greatly appreciated moving forward at this point. So episode 16 of Will's Fifth Quarter Special, the plan is to feature Kevin Dolinar and my father, Brian Farlow, both as guest co-hosts next week. So I haven't decided on a set date to do that yet, but a lot of the main topics that are going to be covered: a recap of the MLB trade deadline and the waiver period, Redbird sports as they get set, Redbird football we're going to start talking about actually for the first time on the show. It hasn't been talked about yet on the show, as the show started in December when football ended over at Illinois State. So we're going to talk Missouri Valley football as it starts late August. And we're going to kind of talk about the offseason the football teams had. We're going to talk about the Chicago Bulls, maybe what more moves they've made, if there's any. I do offseason updates, so I'll do that. A lot of Bears talk, as the Hall of Fame game will be this week. It's actually Thursday night. Baseball talk, Cubs and Sox, and Will's Sports Movie Moment. So for Will's Fifth Quarter Special, thank you for joining this Facebook Live. The Fifth Quarter Sports Talk never stops here on Will's Fifth Quarter Special, the show for every average sports fan in and off the field, whether you're just tuning in for a little bit, looking for something to listen to on your way to work, on your way home from school, or just chilling at home. We are the show on the Fifth Quarter Sports Talk for you to enjoy every second of the day. For Will's Fifth Quarter Special, I'm your host, Will Farlow. Thank you for joining this video, and I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say on our Twitter polls and the podcast Twitter page and social media after this. So long from Will's Fifth Quarter Special. Have a good one, guys.